Hello and welcome to the SkyPyre Podcast. I'm Matt, and today I'm joined by Tyson, David, and Nick.
Yo.
Aloha.
Heyo.
So today we'll be talking about childhood games, what games we've played, what our favorite games were, our experiences, and maybe compare them to today's experience with gaming. So the first question today is, what is your first video game that you've ever played, or at least the one that you can remember is the first that you can play. So we'll go in no particular order. David.
Okay, so I'm not gonna count like putt-putt games. And or maybe I could. I guess technically the
Hang
first
on. What's a putt-putt game?
I will explain because I realized that okay, so it was maybe I don't know if it's still a thing, but there was years ago when we were of an age to be very little children. There was a series of games called Putt Putt. He's this little kind of cartoon car.
Oh, okay, I've heard.
And it's
of
like
that.
Oh,
Putt
that
Putt,
kind of putt-putt.
Putt Putt goes to the zoo. Putt Putt goes to the moon. That kind of stuff. I think they were essentially like really kiddie point-and-click adventure games. Is the
Yeah.
idea?
Okay.
Yeah. And there was like the fish one and stuff.
Yeah, there was a few of
Freddy
those.
Fish, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, they had a bunch of those.
Spy Fox. I didn't play that one, but I think that was another one.
Okay.
Anyways, I don't really count that as a real video game. I mean, it is, but I guess you could say those were probably.
Okay,
There's a bunch of.
so we'll get rid of putt-putt style games and any point-and-click games like that, and any educational math games. Get rid of those.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's
Damn.
only my opinion. I mean, you guys can say that as your answer, but I'm going to say that the first, video game I played was Phantasy Star Online.
What is that?
Which was this GameCube game. It was basically an MMO, but it was like on the GameCube.
Okay.
So
You've just blown my mind. I had no idea the GameCube had online games.
I had
Oh,
no
yeah.
idea either.
it did. It definitely did.
It's ahead of its time.
And it was this game. It came out in 2000, so I was about probably 6 or 7.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it was basically like you make a character. It was like imagine like a normal MMO, but set in kind of like a sci-fi spin on it.
Okay.
So instead of having swords, you got laser swords, and you got a guy who has guns, and a guy who has swords, and some other stuff, and you have like abilities and.
I'll have to look that up.
Yeah. I think it was like a pack. It was like 1 and 2. Like it was this weird thing where like it had like part 1 and part 2 of the game on the same disc or something. Maybe I don't really remember. I didn't actually get very far into it, but before then, I watched my brother play a bunch of video games. So I've always kind of been, as really even before I can really remember. I think I've like kind of been at least observing video games.
So just out of curiosity, David, how old were you, do you think, when you were playing that Star Force GameCube Online?
I like I said, probably 6 or 7 or
Oh, sorry, I must have missed that. 6 or 7. Okay.
yeah.
Nick?
Yeah.
Me? Well, again, barring some of those classic educational games or the, back of the cereal box, point and click. Like I had a bunch of weird Jurassic Park games and other dumb little things, but with the exception of those, very possibly irresponsibly, but likely more just as more of a fringe case compared to most people, probably the first game I was exposed to that I can recall leaving an impact on me was Unreal. The game that named the engine.
Oh wow.
Because my dad grew up being not grew up, but he entered the PC gaming world kind of at the beginning of the PC gaming world, as it were for personal computers. So he'd play things like Quake, Doom, a lot of first-person shooters. There was some EverQuest in there ever so briefly, but so he would be playing some of these things, and I think just the cool science fiction world caught my attention, and the interesting monsters and the over-the-top guns that were the size of small cars. Stuff like that just sort of caught my imagination, and I would say that's probably the first one that I recall. And it also goes in tandem with the fact that I watched him play around with the level editor. So it's like, I feel like games only really caught my attention when I realized that you could make them, which is maybe something we'll come back to at some point. But yeah, that's what I'd say probably is the first game that caught my attention that I would say I played and dabbled in.
Cool. Tyson?
So, not unlike David, my gaming childhood was really forced upon me by my brother. We played a lot of NHL, and we still do to this day. We also had a Sega Genesis. We played a lot of the Sega games. We played Sonic. We played Echo the Dolphin. What else was there? Oh God, there were so many Sega games that we played. I'm trying to remember the specific ones in my head. There were some that my dog chewed up.
Oh, that's good.
Because back in the days of the cartridge. But yeah, like most of my childhood really was spent playing NHL games, just because my brother and I were both big hockey fans and big hockey players, and that was just what we liked to play. We played a little bit of Madden, but not so much because we aren't really big football guys. A lot of Sonic. Once we got a PlayStation, though, that's when everything changed. Everything changed when the PlayStation Nation attacked.
Yeah.
We played Call of Duty on PC a lot. We had like LAN parties in the house where we play Call of Duty. God, I played so many games when I was a kid. It's hard to keep track of like everything I played. But
Wow. Okay.
if we're talking about like the game that I distinctly remember playing the most when I was a kid, that would probably be Knights of the Old Republic 2.
Okay.
I played the crap out of that when I was a kid. That was like the thing that really got me into games as a whole. It was like, oh man, it's Star Wars, which I love, and it's a game about Star Wars, and it's a really cool story, even though I didn't really understand it because I was like 8 at the time.
Right.
But I just had so much fun, playing a Star Wars story and being a part of it. And so I'd say like that's definitely my most memorable childhood game. But then there's also, playing NHL. I'm pretty sure my brother and I have collectively owned every single NHL game since they first started coming out in 1993.
That's a lot.
So, EA, we're reliable customers. Please, maybe give us a year of the game for free. That'd be cool.
And so you'd say NHL was the first game you probably played?
Definitely the first one that I distinctly remember playing with my brother was NHL.
Okay.
All right.
I think for me, apart from point and click games, I think the first computer game. Okay, so I never really played on console for many, many years. It was mainly PC for me, and there was a Land Before Time game on and we had one of those brick computers where the screen is like this, the yellowish pale beige.
You have off-white, like IBM.
Yeah, off-white. Those big bricks. It was way back
we all
then.
had
So
those,
I must have been at most 5 or something when I was playing that. But I think that was one of those point and click sort of things, and the things would move. So it's like, oh, dinosaurs, and it's the movies I like. So cool. But apart from that, I think apart from like a point and click, I think the first video game that I really, really played was Age of Mythology, which is a real-time strategy, which I play to this day, and it still holds up and it's beautiful. But it's that has always held a very special place in my heart from the very beginning.
I find it interesting, and I'm also just looking here in the chat as well, where Michael was talking about Sega Game Gear and Pokemon and stuff like that, and I'm thinking like, you and me, Matt, appear to have the same, or you and I appear to have the same sort of situation where our first experience with games was on a computer. It was PC gaming.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Whereas it appears these two lads, and most likely other people, most likely the vast majority, probably had console-oriented beginnings.
I think. Oh well, go ahead. David.
Yeah. Well, actually, there is something that I forgot that I don't know if like maybe the second game I played or something like that was like StarCraft on PC. But of course, I was really bad at it. So I used all the cheats.
That was me with Age of Empires.
See, I didn't know cheats were a thing until years later.
Oh, I mean, I saw my brother and his friends playing StarCraft, and I was just like, oh, you could do that. Oh, okay.
See, like
Matt.
I think for me, I think the difference between me and David and Tyson is that you guys have older siblings, and maybe even Nick, your dad at least, he's not your sibling obviously, but he's an older guy
He's
who
a
was
man-child, it's fine.
but he was was an older figure in your life who was into this stuff. Whereas me, I knew no one that was into this stuff. There was no internet really. There was dial-up, so so growing up, I have no older siblings, so I'm the one discovering the stuff. In Age of Mythology, I discovered that through my cousins who were a bit older than I am. And so in my household, I'm the one who brought video games. I didn't grow up with that. I had to go to people's houses to discover these things. So I think that's where I think that's why it took me a bit longer to discover all these, what gaming actually was. Whereas apparently David and Tyson and you just like, hey, look, there's a guy who knows what he's doing. Let's check this out.
Yeah.
Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. My brother was not very smart.
Well, let's hope your brother doesn't listen to the podcast. Jeez.
Fight me, see what happens.
And the viewer count goes down by 1.
Oh no, everyone's gone. Let's see. So this is a question that Nick, maybe you can provide a little more context what you meant, but your question was, what was something dumb that you did as a kid in a game for hours on end?
Oh, are we skipping the other question?
What was that?
What's your favorite game?
Oh, okay. What was your favorite game? I feel like most of you basically said it.
What? No,
But-
absolutely not.
Okay.
Halo. Halo was maybe, I don't know, maybe the third game I played. But no, once, we played a ton of Halo when I was a little kid, and then just smoothly transitioned into Halo 2 and then into Halo 3. But yeah, I think my favorite just kind of game to play as a kid was probably Halo 1.
That's a classic.
It's a classic. Halo on PC was what I spent a lot of time in as well.
That's actually where I played it for the first time, because I didn't
Yeah.
have an Xbox.
Yeah,
too.
we'll get into it in some of these other questions, but Halo does
Yeah.
figure prominently.
Matt, what about you? What's your favorite game
As a kid?
As a
as a
kid.
kid that stands out from your
It was
childhood?
Age of Mythology. 100%.
Okay. Tyson, is it NHL?
I
Or would you
mean-
say there was a game in your childhood that stuck out more?
NHL, I just kind of played with my brother because when I was a kid, I was, a dumb kid, and I
You
couldn't really.
absentmindedly sponged it.
Yeah, basically. If you ever handed a 4-year-old a controller, it was basically that. Just, absent-mindedly pressing buttons, not really sure what was going on. So my brother very often just destroyed me in that game because I didn't know how to do it. But definitely my favorite game when I was a kid was Knights of the Old Republic 2, without a doubt.
Okay. Yeah, and in my case, it was I would say it's evenly split in a 3-way trifecta between Unreal and Unreal Tournament, the Half-Life series, mostly Half-Life 2, but the original and its expansions as well,
Okay.
and then shifting entirely off that paradigm, Command and Conquer Generals.
Yes, very, very Nick games.
Yeah,
yes,
well,
those
I mean,
are
they're
my
the
3 most defining.
substrata there.
Yeah, but yeah, I'd say those 3 in that order was how I discovered them as well.
Interesting. Okay.
I also played a little bit of Quake 3 Arena.
That's a good one.
I've never touched Quake
Little-
or actually any Unreal game. Yeah.
Unreal Tournament 2004.
Well, you could try and blow some life into the very dead Unreal Tournament 4 project, but that's a podcast for another day.
So yeah, what was something dumb that you did as a kid in a game for hours on end?
Yeah, so I feel like I should provide my example first here so that others can follow.
I perfectly understand this question.
Yeah, I figured everybody definitely has their thing that they did where, like, when you think back on it, you think back on something that you did for, and this is no exaggeration, likely 40 hours or more. You know, that was unrelated, probably unrelated to the actual game loop of the game itself. In my case, the dumb thing I remember doing for hours on end, and it's either going to be hilarious or make me sound like a sociopath, or a psychopath rather, is in so like I mentioned, the prospect of being able to make games or mod games was one of those things that I think caught my attention and made me interested in games. Maybe I would have anyways. Maybe they just happened to happen in tandem. I don't know. But it was one of those things that I've always done, right? So going through all three of those games I previously mentioned, I definitely took into modding them and making levels for them and stuff like that. And in my time with the Source Engine and Hammer Editor and Half-Life 2, I would sit there and as I would be doing stuff, you'd pick up what the entity names are. And you'd learn the spawn codes and stuff like that. So, you know, like any kid who learns cheat codes or spawn codes, you'd go around and you'd be like, oh, I wonder what happens if I put, 100 rocket launchers in this room, and then a bunch of enemies, and I'll make them fight each other. And that's fine. That's totally normal. What I ended up doing was going in no-clip mode, which is the ghost flying mode. I would go up to the top of the level, I would look down at the ground, and I would just spawn zombies on top of each other's heads.
Okay.
All the way until they reached up to the very top where I was, and I would turn on a mode that meant the enemies couldn't see me. So they were none the wiser. Otherwise, the whole tower would crumble, and there would be this big, huge tower of zombies all standing on each other's heads. And then I would throw grenades at it and rockets at it because in that particular game, when you had the Source Engine has famously hilarious ragdoll physics, but besides that, with the zombies, you could blow them into little pieces, and it was always satisfying to see the flaming zombie pieces go flying off in the distance from this big tall tower of zombies. And I would do this. I've probably racked up like a week's worth of my life.
Oh my god.
Cumulatively doing that idiotic task. And that would usually happen right around the lull where it, like, making a level got difficult. I would reach a point where I'd start to have to actually learn how to do something new or adjust the fine details or deal with the irritation of lighting and other things like that. And I would just go, I feel like doing this thing. And then I would do it.
I feel like blowing up a bunch of zombies right now.
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, that was something dumb that I did for hours on end. Anybody else have something dumb?
Yes. Yes.
David, go ahead.
It was okay. So what I did legitimately a lot of the time I spent playing Halo was, you know what I was doing? So Halo has, I've probably mentioned this on a podcast before. Halo PC came with a version of it called Halo Custom Edition, which was explicitly made so that so that you could upload like custom maps. It didn't have any, it was like the game with no single player in it. Like it was just the multiplayer.
Okay.
And you could upload custom maps. And there was a whole community out there who made custom maps and stuff. So what I would do is I would download a bunch of interesting looking custom maps and just by myself explore these maps and like the weird weapons that people would make and place and the weird vehicles and stuff. I would just explore them. I would just kind of look around.
Okay.
And Halo Custom Edition also, I mean, I think you can get maybe in the normal, but you can access like all the dev mode stuff similar what Nick was talking about. You know, you could fly around, you could, you know, spawn stuff. And then of course they had there was maps where like it was like Blood Gulch, except the plasma rifle shoots Master Chiefs.
What?
And I did the same thing that Nick is talking about. I created huge towers of Master Chiefs. And then, of course, I got into the Warthog gun, which shot plasma grenades, and I just blew it all up.
I'm so glad we're psychopaths together.
This is exactly what Bungie meant to create.
I would like to know that the Master Chiefs don't explode into bits, so it wasn't nearly as gruesome.
Wow.
But yeah, so I would just spend tons of time messing around in Halo Custom Edition, just like checking out maps. And some maps actually had AI in them, so you could like play by yourself essentially against these guys. People did all kinds of shit. They're probably still doing all kinds of shit.
Oh, no doubt.
And something else I would mess around with in a similar vein is you could download. Someone made it somewhere, but like basically you could get similar kind of dev mode stuff, but like you could be in like the campaign. So there was something called bump possession.
Okay.
Where if you touch like a character, you become that character.
Oh.
So let's say I
and
touch
all of their flaws too, right?
You be like, yeah, it's really interesting. Like let's say I touch a hunter. I become a hunter. I move around. I make the noises. I make the, all the sounds of moving. I can shoot I can hit. I can do all the hunter things. And then the Master Chief body is just sort of standing there. Just doing nothing, of course, because it has no AI. And then I can also touch, like, I don't know, like an elite and run around as, like, I could have just mess around. And of course, when you're an elite, the other Covenant see you as an ally, and the Marines see you as enemies.
That is so weird.
Yeah, it's weird shit. But you could just mess around like that in Halo PC. So I did a lot of that. A lot.
What about
Which
you,
is
Tyson?
completely not like what you do in Halo. Just like do like a sightseeing tour of multiplayer maps.
So I'd like to take you back for a moment to elementary school. Did any of you do anything like all the right type or stuff like that in school, where you like learned how to type on a keyboard and you got like tested on how fast you could go?
Yes.
We did Math Circus. Does that count?
I mean, not really, because this was specifically like learning how to type.
Wait, are you talking about like a Mavis Beacon kind of teaches typing kind of thing?
Yeah, we use something called all the right type, but Mavis Beacon is a similar thing.
I don't remember what I was supposed to
You know, where it like taught you to like put your fingers on like ASDF, JKL, semicolon, and like how to move your fingers around so you could type and stuff.
No, we just had teachers that would smack us with a meter stick if we put our fingers on the keyboard wrong.
Oh man,
I had that.
That's
they didn't
not
really
true.
teach me
That's
right.
false.
I was worried for you, Nick.
Fake news. So back when we did that, not only could I out-type everyone in my class, I could out-type most of the teachers and all of the secretaries at the school.
What a bragster over here.
You could out-type, but what came out was gibberish because you were just typing keys. You weren't actually writing anything.
No. The way all the right type worked is it gave you a sentence that you had to type out, and it would measure how fast you could. And I'll explain to you how I did that. So, in Age of Empires 2.
Of course, it always comes back to video games.
Every good story starts with Age of Empires.
There were these great cheat codes for that game. And me, being an intellectually deficient child, did not understand military strategy or really anything about how to play an RTS game. So I just cheated consistently. And this was also before I learned the magic of copy-paste. Okay. One of the cheat codes in that game is how do you turn this on? And that gives you this Cobra, the car, that has machine guns that just decimates everything in the game. And I would spend most of my time in that game just making like 500 of those. So I would manually type out how do you turn this on over and over and over and over and over again without copy paste And that's how I got to be so good at typing. So
Wow.
and it's not just how do you turn this on. There were like the resource cheats too, like Robin Hood to get extra food, or Lumberjack to get extra wood. Just like all those cheats that I just memorized that I would type in manually over and over because I didn't know what copy paste was. And
Oh my god.
yeah, because of that, I just like excelled in my typing class.
Wow.
And yeah, I that's one of the reasons that I was known at my elementary school.
You were the typing king.
The fastest keyboard in the West.
Yeah,
Fastest
unfortunately,
fingers in the West.
that is not the secret to being popular. So I would not recommend that.
Oh, I see.
Depends on your age.
But yeah, that was basically my experience as like a dumb thing that I did as a kid, was not actually learning how to play the game. Instead, just cheat out your ass and make like hundreds of cobras.
Fair enough. Wow.
Just a small sidebar. Out of curiosity, you just made me think of this because of cheats. Can all of you guys remember like the cheat codes to a game you avidly cheated in? Like obviously, Tyson, you just mentioned that you remember those things. Like I said, I used the cheat codes to spawn enemies and crap in the Source engine in Half-Life 2. So I remember what all of the entity names are. I remember the commands, all of the different impulses and stuff like that you would type into the console. What about you two?
Yep. I remember the cheats I used in StarCraft. I remember the some of the stuff from Halo. Yep.
Matt?
The trick is in Halo Custom Edition is you gotta press the tilde key. That enters dev mode.
Yeah, that's like the Source engine, right? You hit tilde and it brings down the dev console.
I think. Well, I didn't know about cheats. I didn't know that was a thing. So
That was intellectual.
So it took me a long time to even find out about it. So it was until I think it was probably like early high school or end of elementary, that time when I was playing Spore, that I really discovered it, and then I was using cheats in Spore for more so quote unquote money or DNA. And then I experimented in other games to see if, I wonder if that's a thing. And so really, I think Spore was my first cheat experience, and realizing that they had that. Because why would you think that was a thing if no one told you? I was just
Interesting.
Yeah. I also I had dial-up until like grade 8 or grade 9 or something. So it I didn't have internet to just look up these things and discover these things. So yeah.
That sounds about right to me too. I think I got it. I think I got high speed in like grade 7. I was dial up before.
Maybe grade 8, grade 9 is maybe a little later. I don't know. It's between grade 7 and grade 9, somewhere in there. So yeah, it took a while, but
I'm lucky. My dad's always been like an early tech adopter,
As was mine.
so we've always
Shocking.
had, yeah.
yeah, no. Like I said before, I'm the one who
Hey.
brought the computer interest in the gaming into my household.
Yeah,
And
it's
I
like
have been the sole one in the household ever since.
All I need to tell you is that my dad got an Atari as a wedding gift.
that
is
explains
amazing.
everything. And I mean, the other thing too, I guess, is no one's surprised that the dad that plays, Quake, and like Quake 3 and Quake 2 multiplayer got broadband as soon as
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you all or Matt, do you have something dumb that you did? I don't think we got to you.
Something dumb that I did, yeah. I mean, they kind of relate to what Michael was saying in the chat, but some of the things were like always not driving backwards, but driving the wrong direction in racing games. That was always fun.
Oh my god, I did that so much.
Trying to survive as long as you can, dodging the other cars, and also just seeing what happens. Just, in Mario Kart and whatever, just seeing how far you can get before the game goes, no, you're not doing this anymore.
Yeah, I definitely had. Sorry, go ahead.
And then I think there was another one where when I was playing Roller Coaster Tycoon, that was always fun. You make your roller coasters, and then at some point that you're a curious child. You wonder, hey, what if I don't finish this roller coaster? The roller coaster keeps going, and physics takes hold. Many people die, and the rating for that roller coaster goes down, but it stays open. So
Because that's how the real world works.
Safety is just a concept.
so that was I don't know how long I did. I didn't do that for too long because I was actually trying to get my roller coasters and my parks going, but that was always fun when you discover that, hey, this actually works. The game will let you do this. You have fun crashing people into roller coasters into other people, just minding their business. It's bad. Oh, and drowning people in Roller Coaster Tycoon because you can just grab them and drop them wherever you want.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Are we
never-
bad people?
Well, you were just stealing. Me, David, and Matt are all psychopaths.
Hey,
I did
hey.
psychopathic things too.
Hey,
Like I did
it's
that
not-
roller coaster tycoon
it's
drowning
not like-
thing.
It's not like the Master Chiefs I was spawning in were like. It's not like they were doing anything. They were just like stationary models.
yours were at least, you would believe, oh yeah, that's just a statue or a model or whatever. Mine were like, you would pick them up and the people would be squirming, and then you throw them in the water and they're
Yeah, see,
writhing in
that's-
the water. And you're
That's
just like,
messed up.
yeah, it was. It was.
There's a reason his face is red.
Is that why my favorite color is red? Is that why?
Yeah. So shall we get on to the next
Oh,
question?
it's so dark.
Sure.
Yes. I keep digging this hole for
Let's
myself.
move on from Matt's dark past.
Matt, grab the end of the shovel. I'll grab the handle. We'll pull you out of the hole you're digging yourself.
Thanks. Okay, so based on, we generally speaking, we started playing games from an early age, and then once you discovered games, it basically stayed with you until now. So based on your childhood experiences, how have games changed? Was there a big change that stood out to you? Is there something that's gone, or I don't know? Is there something that you've noticed that has changed since what we've been talking about, since 6 years old, and like, oh, I'm gonna do all these things?
I think for me, how have games changed? I mean, I think there wouldn't be much that I could say to how games have changed that isn't relatively obvious. With the move to games being more forgiving and more inclusive and more accessible, not in the accessible way that is enjoyable, but in the accessible way that is, for some titles, more pandering. They're leaving it, simplifying them down, stuff like that. I've definitely seen that change. But I think the thing that really sticks out to me when you talk about having a big change, for me is, and I get the multiplayer gaming apparently goes all the way back to GameCube something, which was news to me today because of David. But
it had a special attachment that you plugged into the GameCube that gave it that functionality.
Oh, okay. But nonetheless, my point being is that multiplayer had obviously been around, and I'm under no illusion that it came with the birth of Xbox Live.
It's much older than that.
Yeah, it's much older than that by a huge margin. But for me, I feel like there's this multiplayer boom that happened. I want to say maybe in like the Halo 3, like the 2006 to 2010 time span, where, like, I know from my own life, right? This was when by this point I had consoles, and I'd had, the Xbox, and then now the Xbox 360.
Mm-hmm.
But this was like, huge swaths of my time playing games in middle school and high school were playing, Halo 3 multiplayer, playing Gears of War Horde mode survival, playing Battlefield 3, playing or playing Borderlands cooperatively, like all these things. There's this huge influx of multiplayer, because at least in the circle of games that I've played or paid attention to, so obviously not the entire spectrum, they've kind of gone from single player with multiplayer added to half multiplayer, half single player, to largely nowadays, in many cases, very minimal single player with a well-defined multiplayer mode, and then especially nowadays into the single player is the multiplayer mode. Look at your Anthems or your Destinies or stuff like that. Playable alone, but not the core experience that they designed it around, right? So I feel like the big thing for me was in that time period, that late 2000s boom of multiplayer being at the main consciousness of gaming, as far as I could tell. That
Right.
to me was definitely something that changed since my childhood experience.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, definitely.
For me, I don't know if you guys have watched any of Nakey Jakey videos.
No.
He
On occasion.
has a lot of good videos on stuff around this topic. For example, you would play back in the day. You'd play games like Age of Empires or Grand Theft Auto or I don't know, countless other games that you could you pay for the game, you play the game, you can play it how you want, or they also give you all these cheats, right? Like Grand Theft Auto, you can play the game following their rules, or you can press a bunch of buttons on your controller and get like a tank.
Oh yes.
Or,
GTA
stuff like
cheats were
that,
the
right?
best. That's true.
I remember the Harrier.
Yes, so that's the area that I think I noticed the most in modern games, is that there's a lot less and less creative freedom. I think, where let's take something like Red Dead Redemption 2, for example. Nakey Jakey also points this out pretty cleverly. So let's say you're doing a stealth mission or something, and you have to tail this person. God, I hate tail missions so much. They're the worst things in the world. But you got to follow this person. If you might do something clever, like you might like climb up onto the rooftops and follow them from the rooftops, or you'll like blend into a crowd or something. But if you don't do it the exact way that Rockstar wants you to do it, you will fail that mission. And back in the older games, you could do stuff like that. It's like, hey, as long as you meet the final objective properly, you're fine. You can do it however way you want. That's kind of the big thing with open world games is, you have this massive playground that you can play in. Do things the way you want to. But nowadays it's more about, this is the story that we want to tell. This is the way that we want to tell it, and you're going to do it, or else.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'd say that's the big thing that I've noticed, is just that there's a big shift in the willingness for. I'll specifically point out AAA studios, because I feel like indie devs like ourselves, we're kind of open to that kind of creative freedom more for the players. But definitely AAA studios that invest like millions and millions of dollars into this stuff, they want to make sure that the experience that you have is the experience that they designed. So yeah, I guess that's what I'd say.
If I can just very briefly expand on something Tyson said there, I think something you've made me notice as well is that along those lines, there's also a lack of entropy allowed in games nowadays. I think I'm what I was thinking when you were talking about that tailing mission, right, is you were talking about how if you don't do it exactly the way Rockstar wants you to do it, right, you're going to fail the mission. Whereas like I can very vividly imagine a game from earlier in Rockstar's catalog, where like you could like pick up a box and hold it in front of you. It's like put a bucket on a shopkeep's head in Skyrim.
Yeah,
it's like that's a chaotic thing, or the fact in games like Half-Life 2, where physics plays a large role in the combat and the mechanics. God, introduce a physics system to a game, and it is, like you can do all kinds of broken stuff, and I feel like that, and you know what, you could do that, and when it went out, of course, that is an example or any of these later games, you can patch them, right? But at that time, you'd put out a game. You have your physics system. If you shoot the harpoon at the antlion guard in Half-Life 2 and it insta dies, you've eliminated that entire combat scenario, right? By abusing a physics glitch.
Right.
They didn't patch it, right? They were like, yeah, this is, you could break the game if you want. You can have cheats, in a lot of these older games as well, where you can just totally break the game doing cheats and stuff like that. So anyways, I don't want to take too much time there, but just as an add-on to Tyson's point, I feel like entropy has been thrown out the window as well.
Yeah, also I'd like to make a comment on Tyson's point. I think that I don't know if I think that it's definitely, like you were saying, AAA is like much more, the experiences are getting much more like very specific. But I think that there's these days, what I've noticed is that there's just more games and more variety of different kinds of games.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
So AAA might be tending in this direction, but you've got, great example, Minecraft. Minecraft is a game all about, creative stuff, doing things. And there's plenty of games out there in that vein where they're just like entirely about creative freedom. So I wouldn't say like games as a whole are less about that. I think that games maybe are getting more focused. I think part of that comes from the fact that like games are getting like the graphics are improving, and better graphics requires more time, requires more effort. And so they're probably putting more effort into making you do a specific thing, because then they have less work to do, less world to make.
Oh, that could be one. Yeah, that could be.
Plus, the more realistic your game looks, the dumber it looks when you've accidentally found the wrong side of a barn. Tyson, you quoted this the other day where you were saying in Spider-Man PS4, if you go in the camera mode and you fly all the way out to a boat in a harbor, the person's face on the boat looks like utter trash.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's one of the funny things. The other thing too that's pretty good in Spider-Man PS4 is the buildings. Like if you go up to the side of a building and look in the window, it'll show you one thing. But if it's on the corner and you look at the other side of the same room, it's a totally different room.
Oh, yeah. It's
a procedural system.
That was weird.
Yeah.
That was a weird thing. I think something that I've seen that's different, it kind of touches on what you guys were saying, but is that it's like when Nick was saying, they didn't patch it. Obviously, like when a game came out, that was it. That was the game. And then, you could buy an expansion pack for certain games, but mostly that once you had it, you had a disc, and you can't change the disc. So now something that I've noticed is like all games, basically, there's no discs anymore. There's no hard copy really. It's all online. And even if you have a hard copy of a disc, you load it in, and it's just to do the basic install and do the key to prove that you bought it, and then it's all online anyway. And I found that because it's all online, this is a good thing for major bugs or game breaking bugs or whatever. The company can come in and just fix it and patch it, but they can also just constantly add content, whether it's in early access or not. So coming back to Minecraft, Minecraft is completely different from what it was when I first bought it, like in grade 9, like in 2008 or something. Like to the point where it's basically unrecognizable, and I don't even know what 90% of the blocks and enemies are and do. And I basically find it unplayable now on my end because I just don't know what anything is. And I've noticed with these games, with a lot of games, is if you're not constantly playing and not constantly up to date with the latest patch or the latest news or whatever, you leave the game for, I don't know, a month. You come back and there's all these new things and things have been removed and you don't know how things work. And the game that you bought is no longer that game. and there's
Oh
no
my
way to get
God,
it
yeah.
back. And I feel like that. So again, for patches and bugs, that's good. But then for the content side of things, if they're constantly changing things, and again, Minecraft is the perfect example, but other things like Overwatch, where the game is constantly changing based on the heroes and and buffs and nerfs and stuff.
Any online multiplayer,
Any online
balance.
multiplayer, but even
Yeah.
single player for Minecraft like that is just I bought this game and like this because I like this version. I like this game, and now actually that's an old version that doesn't exist anymore. I don't know. It just I see the benefits for certain games. I really enjoy it in certain games, but for other games where I was like, okay, I bought it like this and I love this version, and now I come back to it a year later and it's completely different. Well, now it doesn't feel the same. It's not the game that I fell in love with. It's not the game that I bought anymore. So I just don't feel like playing it anymore, and I feel like it almost removes playability. That's how I
definitely-
feel anyway.
Yeah, and something that I find with that particular situation is where I think a series like and obviously it's made some missteps in recent years, but the Battlefield series for me has always been a multiplayer centric series that I've had a large portion of my time playing video games and multiplayer has been there. Right? You know, I had a group of friends, we would always squad up and play and whatever. But unlike a lot of these live service games like Overwatch, which like you said, you know, I haven't played for probably a year now, and last time I played, Doomfist was new.
Yeah,
right.
Well, there's
So-
been like 5 new heroes since then. It's
Five new
it's
heroes.
ridiculous, I know. Yeah.
Many of the old ones have changed. All the stuff has changed. Whereas for
It's crazy.
one of the things that I found with Battlefield, the way that they do things, and they're not, I'm using them as example just because that's for me, but obviously many other games do this. But when they actually release a new game, right, in a series, so let's say you take Battlefield 3 came out, and then they released some DLCs for it, and then they released Battlefield 4, right, and then they released some DLCs for it, and then they released Battlefield something else. 1, I think, was the next major one.
Hardline
But-
came before 1.
No one talks about Hardline. But basically, I think that something that does, you know, and a lot of people would say, well, why not just make a Battlefield live service game where you can pick, you know, the modern day Battlefield 4 style of gameplay, or this one, and then just update all of them, you know, whatever. And I've seen that argument online. People saying that's probably the future of it, and they're trying to do that with Battlefield 5. But something that's nice about having those stepping stones is that's where you can rejoin, right? So, you know, if you stepped out of Battlefield at Battlefield 3, and then Battlefield 4 went by and they introduced a new mechanic and they brought that forward into Battlefield, whatever. If that was a live service, you paid money for Battlefield 3, and it's would have played like Battlefield 3 until they changed it. If you go back and play Battlefield 3 now, it plays just like Battlefield 3. Nothing's changed. The mechanics are exactly the same, and there are still some people playing it online. But the point is that later on, what you get is you can reintroduce to a series at a milestone, which makes it, you know. So if I skip 3 games and then join on the 4th one, right? I can learn along with everybody else what the new mechanics are at that point in time. I don't need to worry about the ones that have built up in other games because they will be reintroduced in this game.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? I feel like I kind of fumbled that around a bit, but my point is that in an older model, you'd release new games instead of making it a service, and those new games introduce stepping stones where people can join the experience. Sort of like how comic books do that, I think, right? Like they finish an arc, it's so convoluted that they go, cool, we're just going to reboot it in a different arc. So you can
Yeah.
join in and go, okay, well now that it's starting again and it's fresh and it's not 100 issues of comic book, I can grasp
Yeah.
the 10 that are out right now.
I see what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah.
To add on to Nick's point there, because I'm also an avid Battlefield player. The main thing for me with multiplayer games like that in general, especially things that have progression systems, is burnout. So let's take Battlefield 5, for example. When it first came out, I played that game religiously for a good 2 months or so. And like I kept track of assignments. They have the live service model now called Tides of War, where every 2 weeks they give you a series of challenges. If you complete those challenges, you unlock something, right? And that was something to really keep you involved. It was a great idea for sure. It kept me interested in the game, and it kept me playing and kept me trying new things and trying new classes and stuff like that. And then, you play it for a long time. You start to get familiar with everything, and eventually you get burned out by it. You don't play it as much. And then, of course, Apex Legends came out, and now that's the game that I'm playing religiously. And I had the same problem back when The Division came out. I played that pretty religiously, got to max level, got a bunch of cool stuff, and then I just stopped playing it for a while.
Right.
And then, I don't know, 5 or 6 months later, I decided to hop back into the game and see what it was like. And there was all this new stuff, and they introduced all this new stuff and new missions and new guns, and they increased the level cap and all this crazy stuff that they do to keep the game alive. But that also that's a double-edged sword, because it can keep your concurrent players, they keep coming. It can also be a barrier of entry to players who may have stopped playing after a while, because they may not have the high level gear, so they can't compete with other players, or they may it's so much stuff that they have to do now, it's overwhelming.
See, like that's true for all these games, but especially a multiplayer competitive game like that. The barrier of entry is like, hey, who's got the better guns and armor? The big three for me that I know personally for that is Battlefield, where I would play for a while, wouldn't hit max level, I'd stop playing, then I'd come back and I wouldn't be high enough level and I wouldn't have the cool guns and stuff. GTA Online was a similar thing. You leave for a little while, all these people have grinded for hours and hours and have all these cool things and lots of money, and you're sitting there like a broke plebe because you stopped playing. And The Division. Those were the big three for me. Mm. Yeah, fair enough.
I see.
I think we have time for one more question. So this is one that I feel like most people have heard numerous times. But, there's the stereotypical, kids these days, they play too many video games, it's bad for them, blah, 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 that sort of thing. Do you have thoughts on that? Like, are kids playing too many video games? Because like we said, they're way more accessible. There's a lot more being made. So
I've got
thoughts.
I've got lots of thoughts. My thoughts are, no, kids are not playing too many video games. Because to me, just even on the face of it, video games are a much better thing to do with your time than like going on browsing the internet or watching TV or something like that. Because a video game is like actually like an engaging, like you're actually, at least your mind is like doing stuff and processing stuff.
Yes.
And like thinking, and like, you're not just passively observing something. So I think that spending 4 hours just idly browsing Reddit is a much worse thing for your brain than playing 4 hours of basically any video game, unless it's like a shitty nothing, like idle nothing video game.
Yeah, let's define video game as anything above the mental capacities of Candy Crush.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
That's I'll just chime in and put my foot down there. When we talk about video games, we're talking about something that's not a mindless. We talked before about mobile games, but not a mindless grind factory for microtransactions and the type of thing you do when you're taking a dump.
Yeah, if it's actually like a actual video game, then I would say that, yeah, I think video games are fine. That's my thought.
From my perspective, so I agree with you, David, wholeheartedly. It's like, I would, if I had kids, I would much rather they were playing video games than like doing drugs type of thing.
Well,
yeah, obviously.
Would you much rather them do that?
Sorry, my point being, and those two things are never mind. My point is that there are many worse things to be done. But so I'll take the perspective here that one of the things that I often see is when people say, video games can be bad for kids. I think that problem is obviously a larger problem, and that larger problem is that modern technology can, emphasis on the word can, be very bad and be dangerous for kids and their growth. The most common one that I see, especially surrounding some previous jobs and so on and so forth, where you'd see the way that parents interact with technology and their kids, something like an iPad, right, just becomes a crutch. It's like, I need to do this thing around the house, or I need to leave and do this thing. So here, have an iPad and play a game.
Yeah, you're saying it's like it's like the knockoff nanny.
Yeah, the knockoff nanny, right? And that type of situation. And I feel like what that produces is people, in terms of the kids, that produces kids that are presented with that thing being something that they need to fill time with. And unfortunately, the easiest thing to fill time with is those games that I mentioned we don't want to call games, right? Candy Crush or other things, or, even things like just playing, take an example of a real game. Some people might not consider it this, but I do. Something like Call of Duty, right? The multiplayer of that is fast, repetitive, short round, over and 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 over. Not actually, at that point, you are engaging with it, like David said, but you're not actively engaging with it. And I feel like that's a mentality that's produced by this sort of situation, dependent on the kid and their interest level or their attention span, and then the parent and their capacity to control that. Which is why, for me, I think that they are not dangerous under the right circumstances. And the right circumstances, in my opinion, is to engage, if you're a parent, for example, is to engage with your kids about video games, if that's their interest, right? That is something that, I am very lucky to have had growing up, is my dad played video games and made video games, right? Modded them and made levels. So he was able to introduce me to the fact that video games are more than just sit down, tap keys, and make stuff happen, and lose yourself in that. He was able to help educate me on this technology and how to healthily engage with it. And then even got taken further, which is what led me down the career of game developer, which is where I realized these things are an opportunity to interact and with an audience and all these things. So when you say, people often have the statement, kids play too many games, it's bad for them. I don't think it is. I think that it's a modern thing that we have to adapt to. It's something that parents now have to interact with. You can't just slap it in front of them and say, go play games, kids. You need to sit down with your kids. They're playing their game. Ask them why they're playing their game. What do they like about their game? What are they doing in their game? Stuff like that. The same way you would if they were listening to music or TV or whatever. You'd ask them about their things, so you engage with them.
God, I feel like kids would hate that. What are you playing there? Oh,
Forgot,
Mom.
Well, don't do it every single time, but
don't do it every single time. But here's the thing: you're introducing it from the fact that, if you're a teenager, right, and your parents have never been interested in what you're playing, and then all of a sudden they're like, "Hey, what you playing there?" That's not going to help your situation. I'm talking about if you have young children, right, where in an ideal situation, thinking about my family and my brother's family and other things, where you're kind of like your kid's best friend, when they're young like that, right? Because and their siblings and so on and so forth. So if you get in there at the ground level and help them experience games healthily, and you experience them with them, you'll understand them better, first off, and you'll stop saying stupid things like, Video games are bad for kids. Black and white, 1-0, inherent. This is a fact. You'll stop saying stupid shit like that. So I think, yeah, I've kind of talked at length here, but I don't think they're bad. I think that they can be when they're presented as a solution to the wrong problem. That's my 2 cents, my 27 cents.
Tyson?
Okay. I've been listening to this and trying to formulate my idea, and then Nick just added a whole bunch of stuff onto that, and now I'm just a jarbled mess of brain thought. So I'm gonna to add on to what Nick was saying. It's you mentioned the thing that parents will oftentimes just like plop their kids in front of an iPad and say, "Here, play this game," and then there'll be parents who are like, "Oh, video games are bad," but these are the same parents whose parents did the exact same thing with them, but with television. And back then, it was the same idea: television is bad for kids. But that's also an entire generation that was mostly raised on television. There were kids who are now adults that learned massively important life lessons from Mr. Rogers, from Mr. Dressup, from The Simpsons, from just, TV programming, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, parents nowadays can say video games are bad when they're essentially doing the same thing that their parents did with them, but with a different source, right? So to me, that's the first thing that kind of debunks this whole thought process that video games are bad. However, hold on to your tissues, because I'm about to do something that I'm very uncomfortable with. I'm going to get real.
Okay.
So I don't know if you guys particularly noticed this when we were in school, but towards the tail end of high school and definitely all the way through university, I had a very serious problem with video game addiction. I to be honest, I probably still do have a bit of a problem with video game addiction, but definitely not as severe as it was when I was in university. And the main thing that stems from, in my opinion, is a general lack of education nowadays on moderation. So, in my opinion, video games can be helpful for development. They can, stories in games can be great ways to teach kids things. They can teach kids how to behave properly, consequences of your actions, stuff like that, right? So that's, it's a great opportunity to educate things, real life situations and stuff that maybe they may not teach in a schooling system. But it's also important to teach kids that too much of something is a bad thing. And that was something that I never really got a concept of when I was younger, and it caused a problem later on in life. And because of that addiction, I didn't perform well in school. And now I spent thousands of dollars on a university education and got nothing for it. That's entirely because of my own behavior, and I understand that and I accept that. It was also a learning opportunity for me to realize, hey, I need to take a step back, reprioritize the things in my life. And it's definitely been a big thing for me. So I think the main concern here shouldn't be whether, video games are a bad thing. It should be, we should really be focusing on teaching kids the concept of moderation, whether it be food, whether it be entertainment, whether it be anything else. Keep in mind that we also live in an era where childhood obesity is rising, both because kids are playing too many games and not doing enough physical activity, in my opinion, because of the lack of moderation. And they're also eating very unhealthy food because of a lack of moderation. So really, there's like 10 or 15 different societal problems that all stem from that one concept, that there is a severe lack of moderation and what's the word for it? Modesty, I guess.
I don't think you know.
Proper information.
Yeah, it's mostly just we need
Proper
to
education.
make sure that we teach our kids control, where you play like games for an hour and then you say, okay, that's enough. I need to step away and do something else.
To quote Yoda, control. You must learn control.
Yes, exactly.
Exactly.
See, another thing, a life lesson you can learn from a movie or a form of entertainment.
There we go.
So that's my concept of it is just from a personal experience. I didn't have the right moderation when I really got heavily into video games, and that affected my development later in life. So that if someone were to come up to me and say video games were bad, I would say they have the capacity to be bad. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But then
But they
can say
also
the
have
same
an
about
overwhelming
everything
capacity
else.
to be good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
food
it's
has
all
the
about-
capacity to be bad
It's
as
all
well.
about moderation and control and making sure that you don't have too much of a thing, because too much of anything is bad. Too much exercise is bad. Too much vegetables is bad. Too much fruit is bad. Too much anything. Too much air, you will probably blow into a balloon. I don't know.
I mean, too much oxygen is bad for you.
Yeah,
and there's
exactly.
some things it's very easy to get too much of.
Video games
Hey.
is one of them.
Hey, Matt, I know we're running just close to the edge here, but can I toss one more thing in before you wrap us up?
Yeah, for sure.
I just want to address one particular thing that Tyson sort of reminded me of, and I did an essay on this, I believe, in university, talking about violence in video games. This is obviously a very large topic, so I guess I'll just provide a brief drop in on this, and then I guess perhaps in another podcast we can expand on it further. I decidedly disagree with the statement that video games make people violent.
Oh yeah, that's
Oh,
total
100%.
bullshit.
Because I think you know what? Here's the thing, though, is I think that statement is what's the word? Obscured when you only provide part of an argument. You know, it's
Okay.
kind of like so my thoughts on it have always been that if an individual can be swayed by video games to do something terrible, right? A situation like a school shooting or killing someone close to them, or anything terrible. I don't need to name them. That person was deeply troubled to begin with, right? There are other factors going on there besides the fact that they're playing video games. So I think that to me, that is one particular side of this argument where there's, it's bad for violence. Well, they'll make your kids violent. If your kids were going to do anything actually violent based on a video game, they have deeper seated issues you need to address. Anyways, that's just one of those additional arguments I always hear as well.
Yes.
Thought I'd throw my 2
It's
cents out
a
for that.
closely related comment that comes with, kids play too many video games, kids become violent.
Yeah, for sure.
They're very closely hand in hand, two arguments.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think you guys have all basically covered everything that I would have said anyway. I agree. Moderation is a big key factor. That's a good way to put it, Tyson. And just but no, they're video games are just, yeah, that was good perspective. The TV thing versus the video game thing, I think it's just now things have shifted to video games as opposed to TV for a different generation. I think that's all it is.
And the generation before them was talking about how the record player was going to ruin the world.
That's right. All right. Well, I think that was a very good discussion on childhood games and just how things have changed and morphed from 15 years ago to now, even 20 years ago now. So thank you very much for joining us, and everyone in the chat who was on Twitch, thank you for joining us. And we'll see you next month.
Thanks for joining. Bye-bye.